Cope. A mechanism or self-delusion that an individual clings to in order to survive a situation that seems insurmountable. I'm bringing this up because cope is something that's been inextricably linked to the Acolyte ever since Disney had a rare attack of common sense and cancelled the show after probably the most disastrous first season on their platform since the release of Willow. Sorry Disparu, I know that one still hurts. And truly, as far as cope goes, well, Acolyte fans I think have got everyone beat. It wasn't a bad show at all, you see. Lots of people loved it. It was just those nasty internet trolls with their hatred and their bigotry and their patriarchy that made everyone think it was bad. Or Star Wars fans were just too toxic to handle a pair of strong, diverse women leading the way. Ha! Gay! I think probably the most hilarious moment in all of this was the online petition to renew the show that didn't even make it to 100,000 signatures. And I'm pretty sure most of them were from content creators who wanted to pay for a new extension on their house. But the Acolyte Copium Brigade have finally been given a lifeline in the shape of this article from Forbes, boldly informing us that the Acolyte was actually the second most viewed show on Disney Plus last year, with a whopping 2.7 billion minutes watched.
No way!
Ha! Take that, toxic fanboys. That right there is the power of many. The Acolyte was a huge hit and there's nothing you can do about it. In fact, I'm sure it's going to be renewed before you know it. Just you wait. But seriously though, 2.7 billion minutes watched? I mean, that sounds pretty impressive, right?
Wrong.
Well, not really when you start to break it down a little. In reality, it's a bit like saying that a lot of people learned how to swim because of the Titanic. Yeah, it's technically true, but it misses out some pretty important information for context. For example, The Acolyte ran for 8 episodes with a total runtime of 329 minutes. I mean, it felt more like 2,000 minutes, but let's stick to the raw numbers here. So if you divide 2.7 billion watch minutes by the 329 minute length of the show, that converts into just over 8.2 million views for the whole season. Jesus, I get more than that in like a couple of weeks on my channel, and my content doesn't cost $230 million to produce. Just as a little side note, by the way, and I still can't believe this is true, but according to my math, the Acolyte cost almost $700,000 per minute. I mean, just how? Who was writing the check for this? And why did they think it was a good idea? But okay, fine, if that's the metric that you have to use, how does it compare to other shows? Well, let's take something big like Squid Game Season 2, for example, on Netflix. That only came out around Christmas time and it's already at 72 billion minutes watched. That is 26 times more popular than The Acolyte, and with an $84 million budget, it cost 3 times less to make.
Really?
But you know, maybe I'm being unfair trying to compare Sydney Sweeney's and Rachel Zegler's here. Let's look at some other Disney Plus Star Wars shows for a more appropriate comparison. Well, Season 3 of The Mandalorian came in at a comparatively whopping 6.4 billion minutes watched, which is still like 10 times less than Squid Game, but let's not get hung up on that. Book of Boba Fett also came in at over 6 billion minutes, which is more than twice as much as The Acolyte, although fuck knows how because that show was a disaster. Andor looks superficially impressive with over 4 billion views, but that show had like 12 episodes and they were really fucking long, so in the interest of fairness I'm not going to count that here. But even Ahsoka with just 8 episodes managed to pull in roughly the same amount with over 4 billion minutes watched. That's about 1.4 billion minutes more than The Acolyte. I could run these kinds of comparisons all day, but every single time it's going to bring us to the same conclusion. The Acolyte wasn't a success by any metric that you care to use. It wasn't a success compared to other streaming shows, and it wasn't even a success compared to other Star Wars shows. The fact that it came second place on Disney Plus last year doesn't prove how popular it was, it proves how unpopular Disney Plus actually is, spending absurd amounts of money on shows that nobody wants to see, desperately trying to milk IPs that dried up years ago. The Acolyte truly was the smartest kid on the short bus, and as it turns out, the Disney Plus bus was particularly short last year. And therein lies the rub, dear viewer. The Acolyte wasn't cancelled because of minutes watched, or budget relative to viewership, or any of those boring business terms that Disney Lucasfilm apparently doesn't give a shit about. It was cancelled because it was a complete and utter laughingstock. It had become a meme, a lolcow in TV form, mocked and derided by almost everyone, to the point where it was actively harming the Star Wars brands. Or what was left of it anyway. I have seen so many comments from disenchanted Star Wars fans who finally had enough and checked out of the IP forever after The Acolyte. For a lot of people, it really was the straw that broke the camel's back, and I'm willing to bet that it was at least partly responsible for the failure of Skeleton Crew, a Star Wars show that was actually halfway decent and probably would have attracted a decent fan base if it had come out just a few years earlier. But it didn't, and so it couldn't. So no, The Acolyte wasn't some misunderstood sleeper hit with a groundswell of fan support keeping it alive. It was an absolute, total and complete disaster. Worse, it was an expensive disaster that harmed the brand it was supposed to be building. Now don't get me wrong, it was definitely fun to point and laugh at, and the anarchist in me actually kinda hopes that it does get a season 2, because truly, the mind boggles at just how much further this show could drag Star Wars down. But something tells me we're never gonna find out. And as for the handful of Acolyte fans still out there, well, I guess they're just gonna have to go back to doing what they do best. Cope. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.